Good afternoon. My name is Eric Larson, and I'm the archaeologist here with the Germanna Foundation. And today we're going to be taking a little bit of a trip outside to one of my favorite sites, a little bit of a gem for Germanna. And today we're going to do that for our 5 minutes with Germanna. So come along.
All right, so what we're looking at today is the LiDAR view of the portion of Germanna Peninsula. This is taking aerial imaging, taking from using laser in a radar type manner to bounce signals off of the earth and back up. In this case, all the signals come from the trees, and the leaves in the trees have been filtered out, so we can kind of get a better idea of what the ground looked like. To help orient you, this ribbon here is Germanna Highway. This is the gap where the Germanna Bridge is located as it crosses the Rapidan River, and then on going over towards Salubria. The Germanna Foundation Visitor Center, the Fort Germanna Visitor Center, is located in this area, and next door is the Germanna Community College. Up on the north side of the highway is the site, the Fort Germanna and Enchanted Castle site that we've been working on. But today what we're going to be talking about is the Germanna Mill Complex, and that's over here down along the Rapidan River. We're going to follow it out. There is a raceway, a little channel that leads parallel along the river, leading to just the base of the bridge to this area here where the Germanna Mill once sat. I'm standing next to the Rapidan River along our Red Trail and the Siegen Forest side of Germanna's property. And I'm standing in an area that I believe to be near the top, the head race for the Urquhart Mill Dam and Race. Directly upriver from us, ahead of us, there's just a very narrow shelf that the river's created. But downstream from us, the shelf widens out significantly, and it's through this area that a race that brought water, physically channeled water down from upstream down to a mill site downstream from us. And I've reached a point where the Red Trail turns from the river and moves up the hillside, up the bluff, on up, and then continues along upriver, or kind of heading that direction from here, but staying near the top of the bluffs here. This is that flat ridge, that flat shelf that's created by the river when it floods, that has become such an important part of this mill complex. This flat area allowed them to create a channel to bring water from upstream and direct it down towards the mill, closer to the visitor center. It's here at this point that you can start to see a little bit of the definition of the walls of the raceway. You can see just straight up ahead, and we'll follow it as long as we can until we hit water. So here we can start to see a watered portion of where the old race once ran through this area. It's kind of fascinating now to start to see it take shape. It was when I first encountered this that it made me think about some work that I'd done for the National Park Service when I worked at Harper's Ferry. There, working on a little complex called Virginia's Island. I worked on a raceway that fed 5 or 6 industries out there. And I got to say that this, in places, looks very similar to the raceway that we dug at Harper's Ferry, which makes me really curious as to what exactly this was for. It seems to be a pretty big channel. Sometimes this is, I would estimate, about 15 feet across, but in some places it's even wider than that, 15 to 20, and we'll see that a little bit as we go farther down. I'm curious. It's reminiscent of canals. Now, the Rappahannock River, especially around Fredericksburg area, actually was developed with skirting canals later in the 19th century as ways of allowing traffic to move up, mostly downstream, using flat bottom boats called bateaux, big, long, and narrow boats, about 9 feet wide. Now, a boat like a bateau could easily traverse a channel like this. Except when I look around us at the river, it doesn't seem like there's a real need for a skirting canal in this case. So I'm not really sure what this is for. It's a rather large source of water feeding a single mill that we know about. But perhaps someday we can learn a little bit more. Perhaps we can dig this. We can get an idea about when it was created, whether this is a 19th century phenomena, or maybe this even goes back to Spotswood's days. Perhaps it started in Spotswood's days and was made bigger, enlarged by the Urquharts in the 19th century for operations of the mill then. This is just a great puzzle. So we're looking back now along some of the area that I skipped. And this just happens to be one of my favorite trees that overhangs the old raceway. I've taken some pictures of this before. Maybe I can dig those up and show. This isn't the best photograph of it. Sometimes I can actually get out into the raceway. It doesn't have all the water in it, and you can kind of get a nice picture of it looking down the length. But that is one of my favorite sites. Following along, look up ahead. We got more trees overhanging and sometimes falling into the raceway. But it continues on, as well we. So right there might be a familiar site. For those of you familiar with the Red Trail, this is the back side of the picnic table. So when you use our little picnic area there at the base of the hill, you're overlooking the raceway. So this embankment ahead of us, and sometimes you can maybe see in the distance the Germanna Highway Bridge over Route 3 over the Rapidan. This embankment in front of us was put here when they decided to build a boat ramp and parking lot. So this is part of the access road that actually cut right across the raceway.
Here we are crossing over the access road as we head to the mill site. The access road at this point is crossing over the raceway. This work was done in the 1980s by the Commission of Game and Inland Fisheries for the Commonwealth of Virginia. They were here to provide access to the river at the time. That's since been closed down, but they were building an access road and then also a small parking area. And the parking area is where we'll find the actual location of where the mill once sat. So here I am now standing in the corner, kind of on the outer edge, away from the river side of the little small parking lot that the Commission of Game and Inland Fisheries found or set up here in the early 80s. It was here that they actually encountered some stone foundations, and when the archaeologists came and did some further work on it, they actually found the portion of where the raceway entered into the mill house itself, into the mill building. So they gave us a little bit of information about it. They actually suggest that they find that the mill was feeding what they called an undershot wheel, which means that with water power was pushing from below, not falling over top of the wheel, but from below the wheel. It's all pretty interesting. They also found some documentary evidence for the mill site here. The earliest being from the Virginia Gazette, Friday, October 19th through Friday, October 26th, 1739. This is advertisement. Colonel Spotswood gives notice that he is ready to treat with any person of good credit for farming out for 21 years Germanna and its contiguous lands with the stocks thereon and some slaves, as also for farming out for the like term of years an extraordinary grist mill and bolting mill lately built by one of the best millwrights in America, and both going by water, taken by a long race out of the river Rapidan, together with 600 acres of ceded lands adjoining said mill. Spotswood died not long after that in 1740 as he was waiting to go to Cartagena. He was in Annapolis, Maryland at the time in 1740 when he died before his trip. We don't hear again about the mill until 1797. An insurance policy for the mill reads, Charles Urquhart, residing in Germanna Mills in the county of Orange, insures my milled house, situate contiguous to the river Rapidan, the first story of which is 11 feet pitch, though not 8 feet above the ground, the second story of wood, 10 feet pitch, the third story of wood, 9 feet pitch, a principal roof something under a square and covered with pine shingles, brick chimney to the east, that's essentially about where we're standing, sort of on the away from the riverside of the building, brick chimney in the east corner with a very long shaft out of the house. The whole fitted up in a modern style of mills with 3 sets of elevators, 5 bolting reels, and a great variety of machinery. The length of the building, 60 feet by 40 feet wide. You might have a question. Why are we taking time right during this pandemic to be talking about this 18th and 19th century mill and power supply for that mill? Well, that's a fair question. As I sit down ready for my lunch, however, I can't help but think about the food supply chain. I mean, we're in the midst of a pandemic. Food was a little bit difficult to find on the shelves for a little while. Things are getting better. But even now, we're still having to manage our way out and to restock our supplies. We're dependent upon people to put those things on the shelf for us. We also should step back and think about, well, where does that food ultimately come from? Where's the grain for our bread grown? Where is it processed? How does that make its way to our grocery stores, on into our shelves as we stay at home, try to ride this virus out? I think this is a fair question, and me being trained as an archaeologist with an anthropology background and a history background, I think it's sort of a logical question that I sometimes place on the past. This is why I'm so fascinated right now with this mill complex. In the 18th century, in the 1700s, on through the 1860s, that mill was part of the supply chain that supplied people in this area of the Piedmont of Virginia. That's a long time period. That's 100 years. And what's interesting about that is we oftentimes think of Germanna as disappearing, falling off the map sometime around 1740, 1750. Reality is this was a thriving community with a large mill complex right here that brought people from all around the countryside here, probably Orange County and Culpeper County both, to come and process their grains so that it could be moved on to markets elsewhere. So with that, it's about time for my lunch. I'm going to enjoy that. I wish you all well. I hope you stay safe. We at the Germanna Foundation are thinking about you. We hope to be back in contact with you through these types of messages, but also in reality, hopefully in the near future or as soon as it's safe. Till then, thanks, and hope you have a good week.